what should be the main goal for a law firm which is just started? Is it investing in marketing and sales, or is it investing in building systems like HR system, or building, the admin systems, or getting some AIs to do stuff for you to automate stuff?
After hours, we're now using an AI agent to do intake, and I have fallen in love with this AI agent.
Is there anything else you want to tell to my audience that could give immense value to them?
I love writing content, and so I use something called the hub and spoke method. So the center of my marketing, if you will, are the blog posts that I do. I have Google alerts, topic alerts on things that I'm interested in, and I will get those alerts. I will run an article off. I will start voicing, if you will, an article, why using AI to complete your Social Security disability application is a recipe for disaster. And out it comes.
Welcome back to the show. Today we are joined by Nancy Cavey, a nationally recognized attorney who has spent over 40 years fighting for the rights of the disabled. Nancy is the founder of Cavey Law and author of several definitive guides, including the Disability Insurance Claims Survival Guide for Professionals. So it's an honor to have you here, Nancy.
Well, thank you for having me. I look forward to our discussion.
Right. So Nancy, I just want to know, because a lot of my guests are from PI, they're from business law and other areas of the law. Could you explain what is disability law and why it is so important?
Well, let me start out with my story so people understand where I'm coming from. My father was a World War II naval aviator in the Pacific, John Wayne type of guy. And when he came back after the war, went to Johns Hopkins, married, had children. But when I was in junior high school, he was diagnosed with having leukemia. And he had the fortitude, or I guess the insight, to go ahead and purchase a disability insurance policy that would pay benefits if he was unable to work. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school that he finally realized that he needed to stop work, apply for not only his disability insurance benefits, but his Social Security disability benefits. And that led me to what it is I've been doing my entire legal career. He died just before I graduated from college, and knowing that I was going to go to law school to represent people who were unable to work, who had contributed to the Social Security system, or who had paid a premium for their disability insurance benefits, and were now faced with the prospect of having to change their lives, change their view of their lives, and deal with the disability claims process. So that's why I do what I do. And I will tell you that in many respects, it is not much different, I think, than personal injury law, in that we are dealing with a lot of the same concepts. In ERISA disability or individual disability litigation, I'm dealing with policy and policy terms. I'm dealing with causation issues, disability issues. And similarly, I'm dealing with causation issues, both medical and vocational, in the context of a Social Security case. So I really, quite frankly, don't think of what I do as much different than a personal injury attorney.
Right. Now, when, like you said, you have to buy an insurance for that. And when do the clients come to you? Is it when they have appealed for that, or is it like in the start? Could you just explain the process of that?
Certainly. I represent a lot of doctors, lawyers, CEOs, CFOs who are beginning to experience either a physical or cognitive decline in their abilities. And they realize that at some point they're going to have to stop work and apply for benefits, much like my father did. And so I work with people who are beginning to recognize that they are having difficulties. And quite frankly, what we do is we clean up the medical records, clean up the financial documentation, so that when my client is ready to actually file a claim, we have everything in place. So potentially, and generally, the claim is not being questioned because we've already anticipated all of their objections. Now, in the context of a disability insurance policy, if a claim has been denied, if it's covered under the federal ERISA statute, you only have 180 days in which to file an appeal. And an appeal is the trial of the case. What personal injury lawyers don't understand is that appeal process is, as I've said, the trial of the case, and nothing new can be added after the appeals process has been concluded. The person has exhausted their administrative remedies. So I find a lot of personal injury lawyers who try to handle these cases make a number of mistakes, one of which is that they try to hold their best evidence, if you will, for the day in court. And in that instance, that best evidence will never make its way into the file because a federal judge is limited to what was in the carrier's file, the claim file, at the time the last denial was issued.
Right. Now, we'll go into that, but if I speak of my own father, I feel like that he has a hearing problem because he watches TV too loud. And I've been telling him that you have a hearing problem, and he doesn't agree with me. He feels like, oh, I'm fine, right? Now,
Right.
a lot of people who are in this age, they're also very, rebellious around the notion that there is a problem with them. And now you're saying because you have to put in so much, record from the previous, going to the doctors and the appointments and everything. If they've not maintained anything because they feel like they have no issues, how do you deal with that?
Well, quite frankly, it's incredibly difficult to win a Social Security disability hearing claim. So that would not, in my view, be a winner. You need to have a combination, I think, of hard physical findings, problems, be they spine problems as a result of an accident, be they a disease like Parkinson's, MS, Ehlers-Danlos, MECFS. And so the person really has to have an active medical problem for which they are getting treatment. You and I can't solve hard-headedness. So in that instance, I would say to you, unfortunately, he does not have a claim, certainly at least on the basis of a hearing disorder. But even if he had a hard medical condition that could be the basis of the claim, the lack of medical treatment is fatal to a claim.
Right. Now, I was actually watching your YouTube, and this is a shout out. Nancy does her podcast. It has over 500 episodes, and it's wealth of knowledge. Everybody should check out on her YouTube. So, in most of the videos that I've watched, you were talking about the Social Security sends a lot of forms to people, right? And they hate filling those forms, and sometimes they have to redo them, right?
Yes.
So all that reporting has to be done from the very beginning before you go to a lawyer, or is it like you have to maintain everything again and again? And how are you solving that issue that it makes it easy for people to maintain that record?
So when you file an initial application for Social Security disability benefits, there's a lot of information about your background, your education, your medical history. There's also another form called a work history form, which is crucial. That really is the basis for a determination as to whether you can go back to your past work or whether you have skills that you could take to other work. And then there's other forms called adult function reports. We have actually just started using an AI-based program called Betty. That is, we're getting forms back from our clients in 24 to 48 hours. And so this automated follow-up has been tremendous for us. Of course, we do review all the forms that are filled out for accuracy and completeness. But people need to understand that if you do not fill out forms, Social Security will see that in and of itself as a basis of denying a claim. Forms are just what drives the Social Security system. So our job is to make sure that the client is filling out those forms, filling them out timely, and filling them out accurately. Because many mistakes can be made on those forms that ultimately can be fatal to a Social Security claim.
Right. And from this, obviously, if you're using an AI system, Betty, and then it's helping people fill the forms, get the information, but then people are genuinely scared about their information not filled correctly because AI tend to hallucinate a lot, right?
Okay, so
Yeah.
let me stop because we are using this internally. All right. And
Okay.
so this is a closed proprietary tool that we are
Mm,
using. I am not an advocate of anyone using AI, quite frankly, other than maybe planning a trip or a menu. So the documentation that our clients are giving to us is in a closed proprietary system. No one has access to it. And so people need to understand that it is a tool only for us. And it is a tool that we use within certain parameters, if you will. Okay. Hard stops, hard boxes,
mm,
if you will.
mm. Right. And that basically makes Nancy Cavey law firm separate from a lot of law firms who are using general AI. But then one thing that I've felt, and with this conversation, I believe that it's basically empathy versus efficiency race as well. Because when you're dealing with people who are sort of going through a disability, the emotions are high, and then obviously they would want to talk to somebody, someone who's human rather than AI. So, how do you manage that? And what do you do to ensure that the clients feel safe and they know that they're talking to a person who understands their pain?
I think my story creates instant empathy with our clients. My associate has a similar story with her mother having MS. So both of us have come from families where the breadwinner or parent has become disabled. So there's that instant, we understand it. But that also drives our passion for representing people. And that's where we put our legal hat on, if you will. And so from the very beginning, I'm trying to set clients' expectations as to what this process is about. I want them to be educated, to understand the forms, to understand that this is going to take perhaps several years to get the benefits, but that we are there in the course of representing people. Now, one of the other things that we do is we have shot video at every stage of a Social Security case and a disability case, an arrested disability case, where if you're at the initial application stage, you are going to get a video from us at certain intervals about your particular stage that you're at, what you can expect. And because our practices are disease or medical condition driven, we also do medical pieces. So if you have fibromyalgia and you're at the initial application stage, you're going to get videos from us about what's going on, both in terms of the Social Security case or the disability case, but what we think is going on with you medically. So we try to create not only an educational, but an empathetic platform. Of course, my paralegals will speak with our clients, and they'll get to speak with me if they need to speak with me. But I think the use of AI, and we've been using different AI products in a closed proprietary system the last 2 years, which has just revolutionized our practice and allowed us to increase the number of cases that we have. Now, some people may say, well, that's sort of like a factory. And I would say to you, this is a paper-driven practice. I think any practice, quite frankly, is a paper-driven practice. And there are points in the practice that you can use tools to become more efficient. That doesn't mean you're less empathetic, but it also provides your staff with time in which to be more accessible or more empathetic. So I hear what you're saying. I don't think it's one or the other. I think that they complement each other if used appropriately.
Yeah, that's actually a very good thing to point out, because when you use a tool, you're basically saving a lot of clients' time as well, and then you can handle more stuff within the same time frame. So one thing that I want to know is that what are the biggest mistakes your clients that you see have made or they make during the process that they should completely avoid getting their claim denied?
I think that one of the major mistakes that we've already talked about is not filling out the forms timely. But I will tell you, not communicating with your lawyer is a problem. If, for example, in the Social Security world, you've gone back to work and you're earning what's called more than SGA, which this year is $1,650. If you earn more than that, you're automatically disqualified from Social Security. So it doesn't matter how disabled you are. So I don't like finding out, 6 weeks before a hearing that my client has gone back to work and hasn't told me, but I can see it on the earnings records. So I think that it's this communication back and forth. I do try to set expectations about timelines reasonably. Social Security, the VA, they've all been cut. The budget's been cut by 25%. And so there is this incredible delay that I'm not responsible for. They're not responsible for. But it's something they need to understand. And sometimes their impatience becomes frustration with us. And I have to sort of say, let's step back from this. If I was in charge, this case would already be decided. But we're going to use the time wisely that unfortunately we have. So we're going to get medical treatment. We're going to give a good interval history of your symptoms and functionality. We're going to be compliant with the doctor's medical advice, and we're going to get medical documentation from your doctor that addresses the restrictions so that when that claims examiner finally looks at the case, they have what they need. So let's be a team here. Let's not be antagonistic, if you will, in this process. And so sometimes it's setting, sometimes it's resetting clients' expectations.
Right. And that also brings us to this point that communicating with your attorney is very important rather than communicating with an AI, because I see a lot of people and they put literally their personal details, their medical history directly into ChatGPT, and they say, okay, what can I get out of the claim and stuff like this. So how important is it that you do not share your personal information with an open LLM, a company like ChatGPT or Claude? And why is it important to hide that and go to an attorney before you do something like this?
There is a United States, there's a case out of the Southern District of New York called United States versus Hepper. If you haven't read it and you're a lawyer, you should read it. And in this case, the claimant was using open access chat GPT to put in all of their life stories, their medical records, everything that should never ever be public. And then proceeded to ask questions. Well, what if I did this? What if I do that? What if they do this? What do I need to change to make my case better? And ultimately, the claimant hired a lawyer, and the defense asked for all of this to be produced. And this federal judge said, fair game. It's not work product. It's not attorney-client privilege. You shared all of this with a third party. Too bad, so sad. I have just written, I think, probably a dozen articles about why you shouldn't use AI in Social Security. Same way over here in ERISA. And I just shot a podcast yesterday, I think 2 full podcasts on why you shouldn't be using AI in any kind of Social Security claim. And I'll do the same thing with the LTD stuff. To me, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Right. And that's so true, because obviously you should, these models, because I work in the legal tech industry, I know these models get trained by your data. And if you're publicly putting it, obviously the other people on the other side might use it because it's being trained on. So it's one thing that you should always do, and you should consult a lawyer before you make this mistake, because a lot of people have been fallen into this trap, and there are numerous cases coming out like this. Now, Nancy, because you have so much experience managing a law firm, and most of my audience comes from managing partners and other law firms and young attorneys, I would want to basically harness some of your knowledge for them, that how they can be as successful as you are. So my first question would be that you've been providing value through your videos, through your articles, through your blogs since a very, very long time, right? Why do you do that?
I think that one of our key obligations and duties under the rules of ethics is to be not only advocates, but educators. And I think that writing books, using video, doing podcasts are part of fulfilling our obligation as educators of the law and the realities of what a person can reasonably expect and achieve in the context of litigation.
Right. And basically, if somebody like me, who's not a lawyer, who wants to book a service, how effective are marketing yourself or giving free value or education through your channels to people is?
I think it is probably the number one thing that we do that allows us to grow our practice and grow it successfully. By that I mean, I've been on YouTube for a long time. My podcast, as you know, is a number of years old. And people will watch my material and they will call us up and say, we want to hire her. I haven't even talked to them. We want to hire her. And so I become the expert, the wise woman on the mountain. And there generally aren't a lot of questions about my qualifications or my understanding of their particular situation. Again, I do a lot of videos by insurance companies or by diseases. And as a result, people know that I know their medical condition. I can tell them their symptoms better than they can tell me their symptoms because I understand the medical and I understand the carriers. Now, I think that anybody can take this approach, and it doesn't mean you don't have to be in personal injury, but literally you need to understand who is your client and what keeps them up at night, and then start answering those questions. And in that process, by anticipating the questions, because you already know what they are, you get them every day, by asking questions about the questions they don't ask but should ask, you're already beginning to show them that you are not only empathetic, but you are an expert.
Right. And now, when let's suppose a person who's either worked in AM law for very, very long, and I've talked to a lot of attorneys who say we have learned nothing about business of law while working in the big like. We've been only looking at our billable hours. This is what they say, right?
Right.
But then those people who are just starting and they feel like we should start our own law firm, why do you think is it important to pick a niche initially, or is it not important to pick a niche initially and just do wherever you get revenue from?
So I understand the dilemma you're basically asking me here is, should I do what I want to do what I'd like to try to do, or eat? I think that's really the wrong question. I think the question is, what is your vivid vision for your practice and your life? And there's a really great book by Cameron Herold, which really forms the basis of our practice, both personally and professionally. I would strongly suggest everybody get that book and really lock yourself in a room for a day and ask the hard questions about what your life is going to look like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And in that process, you will build out a roadmap of where you want to be and how you're going to get there. Is it going to be a straight line? Absolutely not. But, it will be a zigzag, but at least you know where you're going, and you'll know when you get there. Okay. So, I think that people too often make the easy decision to do what's exactly in front of them, which is most likely not really what's right for them or will make them happy in the long run.
Right. And now, obviously, these people, like you said, you have to actually pick a goal and then move towards it. You have to pick a niche down and be an expert on one subject matter. But then the question comes to where young attorneys who are not sure about their own career in law, because a lot of people complain about that AI is taking their space because now drafting is done by AI. There's so much stuff even receptionists are going, paralegals are being, fired. And recently you might have heard about the Baker McKinsey layoffs, which they planned, about 6,000 of them. My question is that people who are into law, they're doing law degrees. Is there any benefit of doing law degree anymore?
Absolutely. A lot of my colleagues who are both younger and older than I am are they've got that question in their mind. And I will tell you, our law firm is an active user of AI. But as you've pointed out, AI is only as good as it is trained, and it is only as good as the questions you ask it. So literally, we have built out a closed proprietary system with all the knowledge in our heads in this AI system, all the research, all the arguments I've made, examples of appeals, examples of pleadings, and we use it for first drafts only.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of things that it will pick up that we haven't thought about, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. So it's helping us, an appeal letter could take, and my appeal letters are 25 to 60 pages long. That's a lot of time writing an appeal letter. Now, if I can, basically load, if you will, the carrier's file, the medical records, the vocational reports in my closed system with my methodology, my database, and say, okay, summarize the claims file. Do exactly what I would do if I was looking at it hard copy or on a screen. And so that saves me time. But it does not take the place of my legal reasoning, my knowledge of the court, the knowledge of the judge, the knowledge of my opposing counsel, the knowledge of my client. And that's where I think that personal knowledge, insight, and empathy are an adjunct to the AI. The AI is nothing more than a tool. And I think if you see it only as a tool, you will really miss the power that it gives you to enhance your ability to analyze, your ability to tell a story for your client, your ability to be more empathetic. So that's my take on it.
Right. And I really appreciate that you have a very clear stance on AI, but not all of lawyers who are in your position think the same way. In fact,
Right.
There's a dilemma where you might have heard about AI doesn't, in fact, it doesn't raise the headcount, it raises the revenue, and maybe it will reduce the headcount, and that's really beneficial for the firm. But then the dilemma is that people like you can be great mentors for someone who's just starting out, right? And if they are not hired into the law firms, how will they ever be able to get that knowledge that you right now have or you're feeding into AI?
I don't see, I don't necessarily see AI as limiting the legal pool, if you will. I think smart firms see this exactly the way I see it. And by that I mean, yes, is it a tool to increase revenue? Yes, it is. Absolutely. In last year with AI and the marketing I do, I added 450 new cases. And we added one new employee. Obviously the revenue went up. The expenses were not that particularly significant. However, this year we want to add another 700 cases. That's a crazy, hairy, audacious goal. We've already hired 2 new paralegals and a new intake person, and probably are going to hire another attorney. So at some point, I have to increase my staff to meet the increased revenue and volume requirements. So again, this is part of the vivid vision. We literally have this plan. We sit down and we do a monthly and a quarterly analysis of where we're at, based on our projections, where we should be at. We adjust our strategy which can be painful. But we know where we're going, and we know how we're going to get there. In my instance, finding people who are competent and qualified is incredibly difficult. I mean, we probably have, when we put out an ad, we get hundreds of responses, and we might end up with 5 real candidates. So part of this, I think, is that people aren't really doing a good job, at least in my experience, of saying, this job is not for me. This is where my talent and skills are. This is the kind of job that I want. I mean, honestly, if I had more competent, qualified employees, I could grow my practice even more. And that includes attorneys. So,
yeah, exactly. And that basically brings us to this point that even if there's AI, nobody will replace you if you have built that knowledge and the skills that are required to do the certain job. And obviously for a lawyer, they need to be very, very quick in thinking. They have great critical thinking. I don't think AI is going to replace that.
Right. I mean, to me, this is the old joke, and I still think it is true. When you hire a young lawyer, they're kind of worthless from year 1 to 3. 3 to 5, they're starting to, pay their own way. And by year 5 to 7, they're dangerous because they think they know everything and they're going to leave. Okay. So, that's been the sort of what I've seen my entire practice. But I also think that, it's important that you are trying to find a law firm who is willing to train you. Now, back in the old day when we went to court, all the time, I sat next to the senior partner, and I trailed that senior partner for a year before they started giving me things to do. They would give me little things to do, but they didn't necessarily trust me. It wasn't until I demonstrated that I understood what it was they were doing that they gave me more responsibility. So I think for a young lawyer, if you can get your foot in the door, it's this absolute desire to be a sponge. Teach me, teach me, teach me. What can I do to help you? How can I help you? Am I into billables? I sure am into billables, but I would rather take the time to train a lawyer, train a staff member, and have them become productive than have to fire them and hire somebody, because that's incredibly expensive and incredibly frustrating.
That's true. That's the reality of running a law firm, because if you're not getting the right people, and honestly, I run a software development firm. I know that since AI is hit, the quality of developers have drastically reduced. I have to filter out a lot of people before I have to hire somebody. But on that note, Nancy, you run if I'm not wrong, you run a boutique law firm, right? But yes. The thing is that when somebody's starting, they have a issue where they're like, okay, I need to do a lot of sales. I need to do a lot of marketing to get the people or the clients right now. So early on, what should be the main goal for a law firm which is just started? Is it investing in marketing and sales, or is it investing in building systems like HR system, or building, the admin systems, or getting some AIs to do stuff for you, to automate stuff?
So again, that's sort of part of the vivid vision. I think that you kind of start with systems. I am very system driven, and I think every practice is system driven. So, you can start from the HR system. You can, from my standpoint, it's intake, the initial application, the request for reconsideration, the request for hearing. In every one of your stages of a case, regardless of what area you practice, there are unique units or events that happen. You should be building systems around those. Now, that system should be multi-layered. It certainly should be what's the nuts and bolts, what has to be done first, second, third, fourth. If this happens, then this tree, okay? You've got it all built out. But on top of it, you've got to deliver services to your client. So how are you going to go about doing that? The problem is, everybody can draft a complaint. Who cares? Your client needs to understand why the complaint is important. So you need to be developing information that will explain to them why you're doing what you're doing and how it moves their case forward.
Right.
As I said, I do a lot of stuff with medicals. So if I have a fibro case, I'm talking about fibromyalgia, how that disease progresses over time, where you're most likely at. If you had a spine injury in a motor vehicle accident, you're in the hospital. You're going to get this kind of treatment. You're going to be discharged. This is what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And in the process, guess what you can do? You can interview physical therapists. Let's start. You can interview the local auto body shop about dealing with their vehicle. You can interview the physical therapist. You can interview a doctor about that particular kind of treatment. You can interview a chiropractor. You can interview a financial planner, how you deal with the debt. You can interview a minister or a religious person, so that there's religious advice about how you deal with you not satisfying or completing your role as a breadwinner. I mean, just think about all of the life and practical problems that a person has and build a system on top of your legal delivery system.
Right. Now, Nancy, systems is one of the core things which obviously grows a business. But then there are issues when you have built a system, but then let's talk about your own firm. So when I was researching on you, I went to your website and there was a big number where I could call, right? And then on the contact page, there is a form which I can fill, which is a simple form where I can put my information and somebody is going to call me. The problem with that is that most of the I'm assuming that you may have the similar problems as PI firms because they have a large intake as well.
Right.
When people come to you, they might not be qualified because you see a lot of people might have a conflict of interest. They might not have the correct medical record like you mentioned before. And there are other things which might not be complete. They call you and they say, okay, I have this issue of disability, I have a claim, and etc. Now you need to qualify them. You have an intake person there, right, to do that. But dealing with 700 applications in a month, that's a lot of applications. Have you found a solution to qualify those people so you can tell them that you're not the right people I want to work with?
So again, that's a system we have built out. We actually only take 11.2% of the cases that call.
Right.
So, and then we win about 90% of the cases that we take. So to me, screening is really, really important. And so we do have a system. It is time intensive. But I think that screening is tremendously important. I'm not interested in taking every case that calls. I mean, I know there are some firms that they will sign them up like right away and then decide if they're going to take the case. I think that that's horrific. I would never, ever do that. I think that creates a lot of distrust in the legal profession when you sign them up and then you get everything and you say, well, no, I really can't take this case. I would rather be upfront and say, look, we have screening criteria. And if you meet Ms. Cavey's criteria, she will talk with you and then make the final decision about whether we're going to take the case. I know the personal injury lawyers necessarily can't do that because there's I'm going to call the next person game. But I think they need to have a really, really good, solid intake system. Now, after hours, we're now using an AI agent to do intake. And I have fallen in love with this AI agent. I told my husband I have a new boyfriend, but we've trained this AI agent to do the whole interview and deal with every objection. And I actually tested on myself, and I was the world's worst intake. And at the end of the intake, it said, "Do not take this client." I got graded and I got an F. So there was only one or two people that figured out that it really was an agent. But we wanted to build in warm, fuzzy, empathetic feelings. So we use it after hours. I think it's a great success. Would I replace my entire intake department with that? No, I wouldn't. but I think that you've got to remember that, as lawyers, you're marketing and you've got this big funnel and you're putting it through the funnel to sort. In my view, you have to have your staff trained on what does your ideal client look like, feel like, talk like first, and then what does that case look like legally? What are the things you have to have that you can win? And if it doesn't meet the criteria, please don't be tempted to take that case that you will devote all sorts of time to, that you'll have an unhappy client or a poor result. It's better to say no and then move on to the next case.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I worked with the immigration attorney in Canada. She was bombarded with applications, and not just in English. So there were like a lot of different, languages, dealing with French,
Yeah.
Urdu, Punjabi, and so many languages, right? So we built a simple form for her, which, people could pick the choices, and that it would score the lead if it's worth her time or not. But these things are not expensive, and I think it can save a lot of time for a law firm, because obviously you don't want to deal with everybody, and it might, just take out a lot of your billable time when it comes to, just scoring people. On that note, when, say, you have now decided to work with somebody, right? A lot of people get stuck with retainers, right? A lot of people don't pay retainers, and then they have a lot of complaints that people tend to not pay the billable hours. So on that question, I want to know, how have you handled that? And then if that is working for you, then my next question would be, if you could answer that as well. Is billable hour really getting killed by AI today?
So my practice is really not a billable hour practice, though we kind of have a sense of what the billable hours are. I still do workers' compensation work. I was both a plaintiff and defense attorney, so billable hours was like, every second counted. I thought of every piece of paper as a dollar bill, big dollar bills. So we took, meticulous detail notes about and timekeeping records. But because my practice really is not billable, let me tell you what I've heard my colleagues do, and that is a credit card. In the retainer agreement, they are required to give you the credit card information, and there's a clear disclaimer that it's going to be billed monthly. And you have your system set up, regardless of, all the different systems you can use, where it automatically gets billed. And in that retainer agreement, there's something that says, if you don't pay your bill, you get a grace period of X. But at that point, the legal work stops and we're withdrawing. So I think that is a way to protect one's self from non-payment. In terms of billable hours, we're all trained on unit billing, billing, 0.10, 0.20, that sort of stuff. But at some point, I think, especially when you have a lot of expertise, it's not so much the hour, if you will, but the quality of the service that you do. Because I can do something in half the time or less than an associate. I mean, I can look at something and say, this is what needs to be done, go do it. But why should my hourly rate be reflective of the time as opposed to my expertise? So I think that people do have a tendency to undervalue their time. And again, I have, attended a number of, legal growth seminars. And one of the things that people will say is, don't be afraid to raise your rates. Because you do have value, you bring value. And what you may find is that the people who are going to complain about your hourly rate are the people you don't want to represent anyway.
Yes, exactly. And I think in the very beginning of the law firm, because there's a feed and famine issue, and that is why a lot of people tend to, miss out on putting the card on the file initially, and then thinking that maybe, I might not get more cases after this, so let's just be lenient on that. So on that, Nancy, is there anything else you want to tell to my audience that could give immense value to them?
Yes. Obviously, I love writing content. And so I use something called the hub and spoke method. So the center of my marketing, if you will, are the blog posts that I do. And I've been doing it a long time. So I have Google alerts, topic alerts on things that I'm interested in, and I will get those alerts. I will run an article off, and if I have a spare 15 minutes, I will just start writing or voicing, if you will, an article. Why using AI to complete your Social Security disability application is a recipe for disaster. And out it comes. And then that piece becomes a piece potentially for our website. It becomes a piece for me filming video. And I'll talk about that in a second. We combine them and compile them, and that becomes a podcast episode. And it potentially could be an article in our newsletter. It potentially could ultimately be something that we give to our clients. Let's say it's a fibromyalgia case, and there's a new case that's come out. I want to share that with my clients. We do a lot of events. So we are active in the Parkinson's community, the MS community, the POTS community. So we are out in the public, and we have handouts that we give to people, and that's based on the content that I write. And so people will say, "My God, that's a lot of stuff to do." But literally, I put it in my calendar. I'm going to spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes and do this. I'm going to do so many blogs a week. And then what I do is I do batch filming. So I use my phone. Okay, put it on a tripod. I do use the computer as a teleprompter because I can't remember 15 or 20 articles. We pop in, and I'm just there shooting video, and I batch it, and then we send it to our editors who edit it for like $30 a pop. We come back. I have 2 people in my AI marketing department, and they're in charge of putting it out to the world in every format, every platform possible. But it starts with that one article. And that makes me become a thought leader in my community, and also fulfills my obligation to be an educator to my clients and the public. So this is not a one and done. It's should be part of your daily activities, that you are doing some kind of marketing, and you do it on a daily basis, and you do it consistently.
Yeah, and Nancy, this advice applies to, I think, every industry. What you've talked about, hub and spoke, it's such a powerful thing, because all the people who are listening right now, they should understand that now Google actually understand EEAT, which is basically expertise, experience, authority, and trustworthiness, which means if Nancy is writing a hub, which means she will then write a lot of cluster topics around that, which gives each different piece itself an authority. And obviously, if I am writing once in a year, Google wouldn't really like that, but it would go to Nancy because she has shown that she has in-depth knowledge about that. And that's such a powerful thing. I believe everybody, regardless of their industry, should take that advice and follow that. And if you're a founder who wants to appear on Google, get more cases or get more product sales or services sales, make sure that you provide that value first before you ask for anything in return.
That's absolutely correct, because as you pointed out, one of the ways to get in that Google 3-pack is really to be known by them as a trusted authority. And I'm sure if your listeners Googled who is the best personal injury lawyer in Hillsborough County, they may be stunned to see not only who's coming up, but what sources are being cited for that answer. And many times it's articles that you may have written. So you've got to do this, unfortunately, in the world in which we live with search and AI, or you will never be found.
Right. So, Nancy, on that note, I really like the conversation, and I felt like I'm talking to somebody who is a tech expert and a lawyer. and that's really, for me, it's surprising for somebody who has worked for so long and still so energetic. And I give you for that. That's great. So if, let's suppose they want to find you, what my people can do, or my audience can do to find you? And is there anything you want us to put in the description so people can see and connect with you and your content?
Well, obviously it's caveylaw.com. Go to go on to YouTube. I have, I think, thousands of videos. Follow our podcasts. They're for ERISA disability, very niche area. Social Security, a niche area, but not as niche. But also, think of us if you have a disability insurance policy and you're thinking that you're having problems and potentially need to apply for benefits, because planning is really crucial. And if you know other people who are in that situation, obviously a referral for this type of work would be beneficial to us. But more importantly, it will be beneficial to these people so that they have peace of mind, that they understand the process, understand what needs to be proven, how to do it, and have faith and confidence that they will get the benefits that they deserve, and not spend every night waking up in the middle of the night thinking, how am I going to support my family?
On that note, thank you so much, Nancy, for coming to my show. It was a pleasure having you today on my show.
And thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the discussions and I loved your questions.
Thank you.